So tonight I didn't have any comments. Well, I had one negative comment. And so I'm going to start with that one. It was kind of trollish, but I figured I'd answer it anyway. All right. Religion is the opiate of the masses. That was the comment. So I'd take a look at it. I knew it sounded familiar. It was Karl Marx who spoke it, like in 1844. So well over 150 years old. And he used this phrase to critique religions, all religions. It distracts people from real social, political, and economic issues they face. He said it provides false hope and maintains status quo about Christianity, preventing individuals from recognizing and challenging their material conditions. Phrase has since become a key reference point in discussion about mostly Christianity and its role in society. And that's interesting that you separate that out, because his opinion of other religions was even worse than that of Christianity. And I would tend to agree with some of those, but that's beside the point. So, Karl Marx, we all know the father of Marxism. His potential highlights, the things that he did well for the world, would be the complaints about a straight capitalist form of government, advocating for workers' rights, fair wages, safer working conditions, social justice, contributing to reforms in labor laws, economic policies, and environmental issues. However, the negatives are so far outweighed. Every country, and I do mean every country that has ever done anything with Marxism, socialism, communism, have all led to huge economic failures. Every implementation in historical context have failed. And in that failure, we have the most appalling figure that over 1 billion people have been killed by Marxism or related socialists, Democrat socialists, communism. I mean, billions. It's huge. The number is actually quite scary. And we can look at so many socialist countries right now that are dying and killing off their people. And that is just the way it is. That's what happens because it is government's ideas do not work. So religion is the opiate of masses. People smarter than me have argued this, at least with many degrees behind their name. And, if I take religion in its simplest form, saying all religions, they foster a sense of community, belonging, providing emotional support. They keep you in connection with other people. Countries that don't have religion, typically they work 7 days a week. Some work 6 days a week. They take a day off just so that the people aren't totally rebelling. But so often they actually just keep on working. There is no set apart time for worship, for solace, for peaceful time, for any peace in their life. So they lose that piece of their life. The virtues of compassion, charity, forgiveness, those are completely lost in countries that don't have those things. And if we look on a bigger picture, religion shapes art, it shapes culture, literature, philosophy, it shapes childbearing, it shapes how children are taught, how societies develop. And when you don't have that, if you eliminate that, it really goes down a deep, dark hole. Now, especially if we say just Christianity, then there's no comparison. There is no comparison of other religions that offer the peace and hope and change that can come from that. The greatest societies in the world have come from Christian societies. And that growth is unmistakable. The laws that are in place because of it, the compassion for people in that place. So, opiate of the masses. No, I can't agree. So, that was my one and only comment today, or from yesterday. So, I've got to look at something else to talk about for this time period. I figured I'd talk on weight and waiting. They're in waiting mode. We have to look at a biblical definition of waiting. And I'm actually going to separate that in a New Testament biblical waiting. Now, waiting in the Old Testament, we get pictures of Abraham, 75 years waiting for his son. Sarah, over the age of 90, waiting for her son. Joseph, who spent years in prison and back in prison, waiting. So many other testimonies, waiting on God's timing. Moses got impatient and killed a Egyptian supervisor and then ran away and spent 40 years in the backside of the desert. Must be a horrible place if it's the backside of the desert. But God's prophecy said that the Israelites would be 400 years away from the promised land. So why was it 440 years? Well, Moses spent 40 years on the backside of the desert as he got impatient. He took things into his own hands. I can't prove that biblically, but it's there. The Israelites themselves are a huge definition of waiting. If I'm going to say this in a sort of a joking manner, but if we wiped out all of Canada, we just took over Canada, made it the 51st state, kicked all the Canadians out, which would be stupid, but if we kicked all the Canadians out, persecuted them, sent them to go live somewhere else, they became refugees. In 1400 years, would they come back to Canada and rebuild Canada? It's highly doubtful. But that's what the Israelites did. They were out of Israel for 1400 years. But they waited. They had that promise. So we see that promise and waiting. And I want to talk about the difference between the New Testament or New Covenant versus the Old Testament, Old Covenant. What is the difference there when we get into the New Testament, and especially in the area of waiting? In the New Covenant, we're told we have the mind of Christ. We can judge all things. We have been given all the promises. So when we look at the New Testament definitions of waiting, and there are several different words that were translated waiting in several verses, but they all come down to this sort of generic definition of them. Wait eagerly, to expect fully, preparing for, cleaning up for, persevering, ready to serve. Waiting in the New Testament is not so much sitting in an upper room, because yes, the disciples did sit in the upper room for 2 weeks maybe, and there was like 120 of them up there, and they were told to wait, and they did. But that's the only time Christians are told to wait in the New Testament. And we're only having one Pentecost. I mean, I've heard people are wanting another Pentecost. They're desiring something like that, but it happened once, and we don't see it happening again in the Bible. And as far as I know, it hasn't happened since. So they were told to wait. But after that, they were told to go out into all the world. And they didn't do that. It took years for them to do that. Paul went and did it, but Paul was called at a different time. The disciples that were in Jerusalem would send people out and check on things, and then they would bring people back to them, but they didn't go out. So their wait time, they translated as they were supposed to stay there. It wasn't until the church became persecuted that they went out into all the world. So waiting in the New Testament, we're supposed to be preparing for it, cleaning up for, ready to serve. I like that, ready to serve, because waiting is a lot like being a waiter in a restaurant. I've done that. It's one of many jobs I've done. But when you're waiting on tables in a restaurant, even when everybody's got their food and everything's going well, you're constantly looking to see where you can serve, where you can jump in, what you're going to do, at least if you're a good waiter. When your waiter disappears off the floor for long periods of time and you can't see him, yeah, he's probably at the bar. Hate to say it. I've worked that job. Or he's in the back room flirting with the cook. I don't know. But he's not doing his job. Waiting means you're waiting for your people and what you're going to do for them. So when we look at waiting, it's probably closer to perseverance or persistence, a continued pursuit or prosecution of any business. Enterprise begins, applied alike to good or evil, so that working on something, doing it, becoming it. Diligence is another word it used. Steady application in business of any kind, constant effort to accomplish what is to be undertaken. Exertion of body or mind without unnecessary delay or sloth. Due attention, industry. That is what we should be doing while we're waiting. When we look at waiting in the New Testament, it means to be actively doing this. And it is a skill or trait that we have to develop. It's important for us to understand that waiting isn't passive. It's an active choice, steering our hearts towards God. While we wait, we pray, we seek wisdom. We trust that he will reveal his plans, his time. We want to be encouraged to continue seeking, holding on to that hope while we wait. And I'm going to put a pause right there, because it depends what you're waiting for. If we look at the theology of waiting, we can't help but look at a word here that is very highly abused in the church. And that word is sovereignty. The sovereignty theology, or the definition of sovereignty, there are two definitions. There's this worldly definition, which means in control publicly, like a king or a president or a dictator who's in control of an area. He is practicing sovereignty. The king is sovereign lord over an area. Now, this king, because in the New Testament, we have the mind of Christ.